Okay. Well, good evening. Since it's a little after 7 o'clock, we're going to go ahead and start. And I just want to thank y'all for joining us tonight because we certainly are in for a treat. Before we begin, I want to thank Denise Hudman, who is administrating or hosting this webinar tonight. And as you enter, you may be muted, but rest assured that if you're interested in asking Laurel questions during the webinar, you can use the wave icon that is under the chat. I think it's under the reactions. Let me see if I can't bring it up, which will appear on the corner of your screen. So it will help us know that you'd like to have a question, and Denise will be chatting with you regarding that. And we will make sure we have some time in which we can ask questions throughout this little webinar. Well, let's begin by praying, shall we? Lord be with you. Heavenly Father, I'm so grateful for passions, the passions that you give us, those things that drive us, those things that show us more and more of you. And so, Lord, I ask that you be with us in this webinar. May you use it to inspire folks. May you use it to help us reach those who truly are in need. And Lord, I ask your blessings upon Laurel. And if she is nervous about this, which I don't anticipate she is, but if she is, just give her that boost of confidence, because Lord, we're certainly for her. In your most precious name we pray. Amen. All righty. Laurel, most of you know. In fact, I believe probably all of you who are on tonight know Laurel because she grew up in the Jacksonville area. She's the daughter of Anne and Childress Lee and is a recent graduate, congratulations, of Wofford College. Are you going to get a graduation ceremony out of curiosity?
They have it planned for August, so we will see.
Oh, good. I hope so. Well, Laurel enjoys working with youth, and many of you may remember that she was our St. Mark's Summer Youth Ministry Intern this past year. She is also interested in working with at-risk communities, which has led her twice to Quito, Ecuador. So welcome, Laurel. We're really excited about hearing about your passion and your ministry actually in Ecuador as well as around here. So, Laura, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and what has given you the desire to work with at-risk communities?
During my freshman year of college, I took an advanced Spanish class, and part of the Spanish class was in regard to community engagement. With this class, I began volunteering with an after-school program for at-risk children in a low-income community. In this community, there are a lot of immigrant families, so I began to learn about the struggles of immigrants in the United States and the problems that they face, and that kind of began my journey of becoming interested in these types of communities.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're really interested in working. Are you interested in working with immigrants or just poverty level folk that?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I think there's a little. Well, what drew you to Quito? And well, first off, where is Quito? I had never heard of it, and to be honest, Ecuador is something that I certainly knew where Ecuador was, but Quito was a city that I had never heard of.
So Ecuador is in South America. It is right below Colombia, but right above Peru. Quito is the capital of Ecuador. Ecuador, if you're thinking about the size of a country, it's a little bit smaller than the state of Nevada.
Wow.
So definitely a little bit smaller. In Quito, there's about 1.6 million people, and is one of the larger, more populated cities in the country. And I ended up studying abroad in Quito, Ecuador during the fall of 2018 based off of a recommendation of a friend who had studied abroad there before. She had had an amazing experience and really enjoyed her time and travels So I hopped on the plane and went to Quito without really knowing much else.
All right, and what did you discover there in Quito? I mean, can you give us a flavor of life there, of just in general, before we get to where you were, but just in general, what you experienced when you first went?
So Quito is a larger city, so you have the hustle and bustle, buses, taxis, skyscrapers, large parks. It really, when people start to think about a developing country, Quito is not originally what they would think about. It
Mm,
has a comparison feeling to the United States.
mhm,
Um, so that's really interesting. But of course, you have different language, Spanish. They also have a larger indigenous population,
mhm.
and have different customs, different clothes, and everything that they wear. So that was definitely a new experience for me when I arrived. And during my time in Quito, when I went in the fall of 2018, I studied abroad through a program called IES. And in their base in Quito, it was a language and culture program. As part of the program, I took a class in regard to nonprofits and how to avoid the volunteerism idea, so that when you're volunteering, you are actually volunteering with a purpose.
Mhm.
So I took a class on that. And as part of that class, I got partnered with an organization, and I was partnered with Extreme Response. Extreme Response is the organization who I actually went back to work with this January.
Okay. Well, before we get to extreme response, can you tell us, you said that, it was certainly a different culture. What were some of the things that you learned about their culture, which are different than, say, an American culture? Because I can imagine it was.
It's really interesting. It's not as much rude to arrive late to something. Everybody is around 20 minutes behind at least.
Oh,
So it would be normal for a professor to arrive late to class. It was not unheard of whatsoever. Or if you were to see someone in the street and they were a
mhm.
friend of yours, you needed to stop and greet them always. In Ecuador, they greet with one kiss on the cheek with everyone. So you kiss them on the cheek when you say hello, and then you kiss them on the cheek when you're leaving. Even if there's only a 20-second conversation, you always have to greet them every single time.
Oh,
And
well, that's,
I really love my personal space, so I was
uh-huh.
not a fan of the greetings. It's a
Yeah, I
little
can imagine. Yeah. Well, that was one of the things that I found when I went to Uganda, was that everyone greeted one another. Time was different. I mean, churches started when everybody got there, which could be an hour late, or because everybody walked. They weren't. There wasn't a system of buses unless you were in the larger cities. But it is a different environment. What did you feel like you learned from that first experience?
Well, I think I definitely discovered my love for Ecuador during my time
Mhm.
there, and my passion for learning about at-risk communities and how to best support them in a way that is not overbearing. Um, so I think that was something I learned there. I definitely had the opportunity to improve my Spanish. I
Mhm.
lived with a host family when I went there at the beginning, so they did not speak any English. So if I wanted something, I had to find a way to say it, or it was not
Okay.
going, or it was not going to happen. Or if you were lost, you had to communicate, or you were never going to find out where you were.
Ah,
So I had a lot of personal growth during my first time there.
but I bet it gave you some self-assurance as well. You know that you can learn to do these things now. You
Yes,
can,
without a doubt.
oh, bravo for that. Well, tell us a little bit about the organization Extreme Response, and how did you get involved with them?
So I began with Extreme Response as part of one of my classes. Extreme Response is an international organization, and it works in 3 different countries. It works in South Africa, the Philippines, and in Ecuador. It
Mhm.
started in Ecuador in around the early 2000s, I believe. There's a man, Jerry Carnell, is the founder of the organization, and he was living and working there for another nonprofit. And one day he had heard about a community called Sambisa. And he went out to the dump. It's called Sambisa. So he went out to the dump one day and he stumbled upon a few children. And he began talking with the children. And he said, "Oh, what are you guys doing?" They said, "Oh, we're just playing." And he goes, "Okay, well, I'm going to come back tomorrow and bring a few friends and we could play some games." So Jerry returned the next day with a few friends, and he came back, and there were around 30 kids that day. So he
Wow.
learned about this community of recyclers that lives in Sambisa.
All right, recyclers. Explain what that community is.
So recyclers is more or less they dig through the trash in the dump looking for water bottles, glass, metal, anything like that that can be recycled. So they spend the whole day sifting through trash.
Hmm. And when they find this, what do they do with it?
So they actually it has improved since the early 2000s when the organization started, but they are processing it and they give it to the government or to different recycling plants, and they
Mhm.
receive money for what they're able to turn in.
Oh,
But
so
as you can imagine, it's not much.
I can, yeah, well, it's probably like similar to here in a way. So it's very much, that is how they earn their living. Is that correct?
Mhm.
So it's a
Yes.
real community in that sense. Does the community live within the dump, say, because I'm thinking of a recycling community in Mexico, and they literally live in the dump that they work in.
Yes, so they live in the dump, and the organization has been working with some of the families to try and move them more to the outskirts because it's not safe, it's not healthy, it's not safe for due to violence, and it's also not safe for health reasons. It's not
Hmm.
a sanitary place to live. So they've been working to try and move the families more in the outskirts, and to moving them into different houses. So I
Hmm.
think before some of the families were more living in sort of like shack-like houses, and the organization has helped them to upgrade.
Okay. Well, what were your first feelings? Do you remember what you felt, your first feelings when you first encountered some recyclers, or the environment in which they were living and working in?
So when I first heard about this, I was a little confused by the concept, and then I started to notice it as I was walking through the streets. So you have recyclers that work in the dump, and you also have recyclers that just go through the trash cans on the street by you that are
Ah,
picking it out, and it's just part of something that you see every day, which is
hmm.
as not the same as here.
Hmm.
So I was a little bit saddened by this, and it was also really interesting because this community, there's very much the trend of the children are pulled out of school at
Hmm.
some point or another because the family needs help. They need more people recycling in order to bring in more income for the family. So this is the cycle that the organization is working to break. So there's a mom of one of the children in the program. She dropped out of school when she was in third grade to start recycling with her family. So she is
Wow.
unable to read and write. So it's
Wow.
a huge change, and it's very difficult for her to even help her son with work because
Hmm.
of this.
So really, it's a thing that's a cyclical thing that you have to break that cycle
Mhm.
in order to move away, in order to better one's life. Would that
Yes,
be a fair assessment? Oh,
yes.
wow. Yes.
So the organization more or less is when they're talking with the parents, they're telling them that it's going to be more beneficial if your children can stay in school now and that they can keep going for the family in the future, that they
Mhm.
will have more opportunities.
Do the parents support that, or is there some resistance to that?
There's definitely a little bit of resistance because these parents were also pulled out of school around this age to begin
Mhm.
working. But due to different regulations in the government now, the children have to be in school, but there are still families that do not follow those laws. In order to help assist the parents, Extreme Response has actually started working on micro businesses with the parents, teaching
Mhm.
them new trades and crafts so that their only source of income does not have to be recycling. For
Mm.
example, they had a workshop when I was there for the parents. They brought in an expert on the micro businesses to come talk to the families. So the women were learning about how they could start their own little empanada street business,
Mhm.
or the men were learning about construction, how to build chairs, tables that they could sell.
Mhm. And what did you do?
So, my days were a little bit busy. I started working with a partner organization in the morning to Extreme Response. So one of the things that they actually do is they work with other local organizations to help support them, to help train their leaders. So there is a school that I worked at called El Rey Sabio Salomon, and
Mhm.
it's run by another foundation. So I worked in the school from around 7 a.m. to 12 each day as an assistant teacher. So I helped in anything from English classes to science classes. Developed my Spanish a lot during my time there because of
Yeah, yeah.
the new vocabulary that I was learning. And then in the afternoon at 12, I would leave and I would head to the after school program that was run by Extreme Response.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, the after school program, what do they do there? I mean, I would think that the parents would probably want them to be recycled, but so what do you do in the after school program?
So there's so many benefits to the after school program
Mhm.
run by the organization. For instance, many of the families don't have access to internet or computers, and the children need this technology in order to do their homework. So the
Mhm.
children come, they are fed first a nutritious meal when they come in, and it's really interesting. After the meal, they all have chores that they have to do each day. So you'll have 3 or 4 kids that are in the kitchen with a little line, and they're all helping wash dishes by hand and dry everything. So it very much feels like a community. So they start with that, and then after that, they go into time with homework help. So they work
Mhm.
on homework, and we also started um, a reading challenge with the kids this year. So if they didn't have homework for some reason, they would read for 10 to 20 minutes based off of their age, or they would have different math worksheets that they could continue practicing. After homework time, we would have a workshop each week,
Mm.
each day. And each week we'd have a similar theme. One of my favorite themes that we had one of the weeks was our dream workshop. So we began that week talking to the kids about what is their dream. Many of the children have not thought about their dreams, nor have ever been asked what they want to be in the future,
Mm.
because it's very much outside of the limit. It's outside of perspective of the families. It's more or less we have been recyclers in the past, and that's what we'll continue being in the future. So
Mm.
for a lot of the kids, this was the first time they ever thought about it, whether they wanted to be a doctor, an artist, or a teacher.
Mm.
So that was really impactful because you could see some of the kids were really nervous when you would ask them, and it would take a day or two for them to even share with any of us what they wanted to be. So we
Mhm.
talked about their dreams and also the importance of hard work and what it takes to accomplish those dreams. We also showed the kids a few videos of of different people in Ecuador. There was a famous cyclist, and he had started in it. He had lived in a small town, and he had found a bike and repaired the bike, and he is now racing in the Olympics for Ecuador. So we wanted the kids to see that there are people that have come from your similar circumstances,
Uh-huh.
and they've overcome them, and so can you. So we have
Mm.
a time of taller each week, so the workshops. And then after that, we also had a Bible time. So we started focusing on only 1 to 2 stories each week. And the kids would learn the stories through different ways, whether that was acting out the story, doing an arts and crafts project with the story. So that was great. And then they also had a circle time where they would be placed with one of the teachers, and it would be around 8 children, and they would have the opportunity to talk about what was going on in their families and ask for prayers if that's what was needed. I think one of the most important things with this circle time is that the children know that someone cared and that God truly cares about what's happening with them and that they need to be asked how they're feeling.
Mm. So it sounds like, wow, there's a lot. Do you have a couple of children that you remember that really are, that you became close to, that you can tell
I
us about?
Yes, I do. So there was one of the little girls I came closest to this year, and she had, her name is Damaris, and she is 12 years old, and she has a sister who is 10 years old, and to watch them interact really reminded me of the relationship that I have with my sisters and how my oldest sisters look out for me. So that was something really special. And
Mm.
each day, Damaris and I would spend a long, long time on her math homework because they are teaching math a completely different way than I have learned with long division. And she and I would sit there like, we're going to figure this out. We can do it.
Mhm.
So I really had the opportunity to form special bonds with these children. And
Mm.
I'm very grateful for those relationships.
Oh, wow. Yes. Yeah. Was there something that, do you want to go back? Are you interested in go and returning and working, or?
I'm interested in going wherever God takes me, I guess I would say. I absolutely adored the children that I worked with. And I know for at least if I'm able to go back to Quito for a week and see them, I would love to, just based off of when I had to leave. I didn't get to say goodbye to them. But something that has been really special is I know that these relationships that I've built with them, they are long lasting, for the
Mhm.
fact that when I went back the second time, the kids were like, she's back. And most of the time, people don't have the opportunity to return. So I was able to see them again and see how much they had grown in a year. And even when I got back to Jacksonville after leaving due to the coronavirus, I still continued receiving messages from the children and their parents through WhatsApp asking for homework help or just asking how I'm doing. And the kids will send like, I miss you. And I think
Um,
that has been super special and meaningful to me.
yeah, yeah, it sounds like it. It sounds like it has. When you were talking about, prayers, is the Catholic faith, I take it, is the main faith is in Ecuador? Is that would that be correct?
Yes, Catholicism is the most prominent faith, and but then right now there are a few other denominations, but primarily everyone is Catholic.
Mhm. Did you get an opportunity to share your faith?
With the children,
Hmm.
I was definitely able to share with them why and talk to them about why I was there and how much I had felt the love of God and how I wanted them to know Him too. And
Hmm.
it's really cool because the organization actually does Bible studies with the
Oh, that's great.
families, also with the parents. There's a men's study and a women's study.
Hmm.
And the leader of the women's study has received messages during quarantine, and she has seen that the women are still continuing with the study, even though they're not all able to meet as a group.
Hmm.
And this is one of the things that I think is really great. So as I talked about earlier, one of the moms who cannot read or write, her sister also participates in the Bible study. So her sister reads to her the Bible study before they go to the meeting each week.
Oh, wow, that's
Mhm.
wonderful. That is really
I know
wonderful.
they're
We
very
did
devoted.
have we had a question that someone asked, if that you're able to communicate with the children. Is that correct? In the form of WhatsApp, is that?
I receive a lot of messages through WhatsApp or even the Facebook messages I'll receive from the parents' accounts. The kids will log on to their parents' account and send me a message through there. One of the things the organization has actually been working on during this quarantine is funding, so that the families do have access to Wi-Fi for WhatsApp,
Mm-hmm.
because the children are actually receiving their homework through WhatsApp. So here in the US, kids are zooming into class. In Ecuador, it's more or less a larger group message with families.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So they're just being sent the documents each day.
Oh, okay. Are there any questions? We might want to open it up for a moment because I did say we would. See if there are any questions for Laurel. Does anyone have questions? Denise, you may need to unmute us all. Oh, I can't hear you.
I'm sorry, they can raise their hand in
They
the
can
little,
raise their hand.
or send a question via chat.
If you have a question, hit chat and type it and we'll ask.
Or raise their hand.
Or raise your hand and you can find the hand wave under reactions down at the bottom of the screen or at some edge of the screen. Let me put it that way, or depending on where you are. Okay. Well, I don't see any questions. You were working, so I'm going to continue on, and if one pops up, we'll start. So you were working with the children when the coronavirus or COVID-19 began to hit Ecuador. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did any of the folks, any of the parents or families become positive for COVID-19 while you were there?
Right now, none of the families have the virus, and I was able to look online about where their community is and where they live, and there are only around 5 cases, more or less, in their neighborhood. So very fortunate that no one in their community has the virus yet.
Truly, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But it's interesting, when they first started talking about the virus in the news, all of the children knew about the virus. And it was an immediate sense of panic for them.
Why was it?
Why did panic?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think their whole idea was this is going to take over and more or less we're all going to die, was the immediate thought for all of them, just for not fully understanding what this virus is and what it has the capability of doing. They were just filled with fear.
What is do they have good health care, or what kind of health care do they have in Ecuador, especially for these kinds of this people group that you were working with?
So the government does have free health care that they can use, but a lot of the times I do not think it is the best. The public health care I would not recommend. So a lot of the families do have issues and end up getting sick from working in the dump. But a lot of times, whatever they have, the doctors just dismiss it.
Are there mostly home remedies that are used?
Some of the families do identify with some of the indigenous groups who do have different herbal remedies and things that they like to use. But in general, they more or less have the mindset that if you have something and it's not killing you, and it's not going to kill you, and it's not causing you a ton of pain, that you can just continue on with it.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay. Well, so when you heard about the COVID, did the State Department or who told you needed to go into quarantine or return to the U.S.?
So we had our first case. Other
than your father.
Other than my family. We had our first case in late February. I think it's about February 29th. And they announced that a woman in the coast, so Quito is more in central Ecuador, a woman in the coast from Spain had the virus and that she had come to visit her family. And during that time, I think it was about 20 days later was when they put the country on lockdown. So, and the coast is really where the virus has spread the most. I think in total, Ecuador has about 30,000 cases right now. But in this province where this first lady came, there are about 13,000 cases, over 13,000 cases. And then in Quito, which is the capital, about 1.6 million people, I think there's only about, 1,300 cases or 1,600. So definitely a smaller number in Quito.
Because it's not on the coast, is that?
Because it's not on the coast. But if you look at the provinces on the coast, that's where you have the highest number of cases. But quarantine there is a lot different than we're experiencing here in Jacksonville. If you leave the house and without permission to go work or do something of that nature, you can receive a fine up to $6,000.
Oh, wow. So it's total lockdown then in
It's a
Ecuador.
complete lockdown. There are specific days, about 2 days a week, based off of your social security number, that you can go to the grocery store.
Wow.
Public transportation has been shut down completely, um, unless you are someone that is working in the healthcare industry, then you are able to take the bus. But more or less, everything is completely shut down,
Mm.
which is very difficult when we think about struggles here for people living day to day. For these families that are recyclers, they are now almost 2 months without being able to go back to work.
Mhm.
So they normally live off $1 a day per person per family.
Wow.
So not, and they live day to day. So they are completely without funds at this point.
Mm. That's hard. That really is rough. Um, when you found, do any of them, are they fined if they catch them in the dump, if you will, or did they?
Yes, that is completely shut down right now. Nobody
Mm.
can go.
Nobody can go in. Okay. Oh,
Nobody.
wow. Um, when you found out, when did you told me that you had to go into quarantine um, before returning. I mean, what told you you needed to go back to the States? The fact that you were an American in a foreign country or,
So when the virus first broke out, I think in Quito, we only had about 5 cases when they put the city on lockdown. So
Mhm,
I think I was holding out a little bit of hope and wanted
mhm,
to wait a few days because I knew that the embassy had flights that the U.S. Embassy had flights going from Quito to Miami about every other day. So I wanted to wait and see, is there the possibility that if I wait this out here for a month and spend a month in quarantine, that we will return back to somewhat of a different normal. But I
mhm,
waited about, I say, 10 or 11 days in quarantine there, and I hadn't left the house, and the news, more or less, things were just progressively getting worse. The numbers weren't increasing drastically in Quito, but I could tell that we were not going to be released anytime soon.
mm.
So then I decided to hop on one of the flights to come home, which definitely was the right decision now.
Oh, well, so you took, so you took so you were in quarantine, were in the house that you were staying in during your time there, is that correct?
Mhm.
Okay, and then you got out through the embassy. So you really had to work through the embassy quite a bit. You didn't go on a commercial flight, in other words.
Oh no, the embassy it was very smooth. I just submitted my passport number
Hmm.
and I received an email a few hours later with the time that my flight was leaving and that I needed to be at the airport at that time
Oh,
with the
okay.
correct documents printed out because you are stopped by the military as you're driving
Hmm.
because they really are controlling the roads.
Hmm. You told me, well, when was the most, you were not really afraid during this time, you said. You telling me, when were you, I love it when you told me, where were you the most afraid during this whole episode?
Well, I was only a little bit fearful when I got to the airport and my mom starts talking to me about I was flying from Quito to Miami and Miami to Jacksonville about how all of these people were getting the virus from the Miami airport. And then it
Yeah.
wasn't up until that moment that I was nervous. I was like, Mom, why are you telling me this right now? But in general, I was pretty relaxed once I got on the plane because on my flight from Quito to Miami, I had a whole row to myself, and so did every single other person on the flight. And then when I was in the Miami airport, I'm pretty sure I only saw about 30 people total,
Hmm.
and I only had 10 people on my flight from Miami to Jacksonville. So I then again had my own row with other empty rows around me. So at that point, I was like, I think I'm going to be okay.
Yeah, and then you had to go into quarantine here. So we're glad you're out of quarantine now. It's good.
Me too, Nancy.
And you never got it, correct?
Never got it.
Well, we
Completely.
have a couple of questions. This is one, if you can get a child out of recycling, what is the most likely opportunity above recycling? that you have?
So right now, if you have at least your high school education, you definitely have more opportunities for work. Uh, this could be anything from working in the tourism industry to working at a retail store. You
Mhm,
definitely have more opportunities. But if you do not get through high school, um, there's more or less nothing for you to do.
mhm,
Besides for selling things in the streets or cleaning cars or anything like that.
mhm.
Um, but it is great. So in Ecuador, the universities, they also have public universities that are completely free. So since the organization still is relatively new, they're hoping in the next few years to be sending their first students off to college.
Oh, that'd be great. That would be great. All right, we have another question. He said, often people are eager to think how other places and peoples can learn from America. But what do you think that we should learn from your second home in Quito?
What would I say that we should learn? I think the time that the people take in Ecuador to greet one another, even though I'm not a fan of being kissed on the cheek by every single person that I know, um, they actually take the time to care for one another, to ask how you are doing. And it is very much intentional. And through this, I was able to build relationships with not only the kids, but with their parents. When the parents would come to pick the kids up each day, they would be asking me how I was doing. Uh, and it was just something very genuine about the people there. And I
Mhm,
think that's something we could learn from here a little bit more in the US, to not be so only focused on what we have to do, but talk
mhm.
to those around us.
Talk to be aware of those, be supportive, and well, to love one another.
Mhm.
You say, I think that the fact I found that, and I'm sure you did too, when I was overseas, that they're more concerned about the relationships than they are about what you are bringing them. They're more concerned about, they would prefer it if you would just come and spend time with them, because it's an honor. It's considered an honor that you would travel all this way to come see them. And would you say that's a fair assessment of what you experienced, or
I would say yes. They very much value relationships, and
mhm.
especially family. Even with my host mom each night, when we would sit down, we would eat dinner, but after dinner, we would still sit at the table for at least another 30 minutes to an hour talking.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Mhm. Most definitely.
Are there any further questions? Uh, what do you feel is, what, here we go. What do you feel is God's plan for you now?
I've really been praying about this, but I would love to continue working with at-risk children and children that live in at-risk communities. So I am applying for jobs and am hoping for the best, and that God opens the correct door and gives me the discernment to know when it's right.
I bet he will. We have another question too from the Irving family. What is the best way for someone in the U.S. to support the people of Quito?
I can tell you that if you are able to donate anything right now to Extreme Response,
You mean money
your
wise?
donation, your
Okay.
donation would definitely be put to use. So right now they are bringing food to the families each week, and then they are simple things such as rice, oats, and oil, cooking oils. But I cannot express how much the families need this right now. They also are sending. I read a cute little story written by one of the workers for the organization, and he had said that they had added in little Jello packets of Jello for the families,
Oh,
and the mom expressed her gratitude for this little packet of Jello because her son lit up when he saw it, because this was something that they hadn't had, and something sweet.
oh, wow.
When you're
Yeah.
living off more of eating just rice or oats or one meal a day, that
Mhm.
little serving of Jello is actually very meaningful.
Wow, that's awesome. That's all. And so you can, what is there a website that folks can go to if they want to, is it, um,
Yes, if you Google, it's Extreme Response International, and it's based out of Atlanta.
oh, okay, great.
And they have a link for donations right now. But I've been able to keep up with some of my coworkers there who I've been with, and I have been able to hear just amazing stories about how God is using them during this difficult time in this community, and how God really is reaching his people still. That his work has not ended, even though everything else has been put on pause.
I realize that it's their story, but is there a story that you could share that they have given you that we can maybe close out with?
Um, yes, I just think this is something that is really, this is something that's really exciting. So two families during this quarantine have actually both had children, new babies brought into the families. So right now, you're 2 months without income, and more or less you're not prepared to have a baby come into the house. The organization was able to come bring baby clothes, food, diapers, all of these gifts to come help support these families, because without it at this point they really would have nothing.
Mm.
So I can tell you the organization is truly doing God's work right now there.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Are there any more questions for Laura before we close out? Give you a few minutes. Laura, I just want to thank you for your passion, because you can see it in you that you have a passion for children, and certainly for those who are in need. And I am thankful, and I know that God is going to use that in truly wonderful ways in the future. So I truly wish you good luck on that. And of course, if we can help in any way, please let us know. And for those of you who are still on and are interested further, I'm sure you can get in touch with Laurel personally and ask her more about her adventures, as well as about the organization and the people that she served in Quito. So thank you, Laurel, for being with us tonight. I really, really appreciate you being willing to share, truly do. Next week, we will have someone from NAMI who will be here, and we'll be talking about some of the stresses and strains of being in isolation and of being, safely confined to your homes, if you will. So I hope that you will turn in and listen to this particular speaker. I think it should be very good. Thank you again, Laurel, and good night, everyone, and thanks for coming in and supporting this ministry. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you.